nation. Thank you, Ashley, for that amazing introduction. I am North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs, and I am so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of what we learned in our fight to win back power in North Carolina, all the while combating an insidious, unprecedented effort to overturn a lawful election. But first, just to follow up a little bit on my background, I spent my career as a civil rights attorney with a focus on voting rights, and I litigated redistricting cases all across the South, including Texas. So, I know a little bit about some things. I was and do consider myself to be a movement and community lawyer. I was appointed to the Supreme Court, and I ran my 2024 campaign explicitly on my values. Not how I'd rule on a case, but why people should trust my judgment in this important role. I spent a career defending democracy, so I know how precious and fragile it is and why we fight for a multiracial, inclusive democracy. I ran as the youngest woman to ever serve on the North Carolina Supreme Court and the only woman on any of our state appellate courts right now of childbearing age in a moment where Dobbs sent the decision about our access to reproductive health care back to the states and back to state Supreme Courts. Having directly affected people at the decision-making table matters. But this was never just about me or just about the 2024 election. I was running to keep my seat on a court where I was one of only 2 Democrats out of 7 seats. So winning my race wasn't the end game. It was part of a 3-election cycle plan to win back control of our state high court. And we were a little late to the game, but we have embraced the concept that you all know well, that building power requires multi-cycle, continuing work and strategy. And so we did what we needed to do in 2024, holding my seat, albeit after a 6-month battle to uphold an election we already won. So as Ashley mentioned, I won my race to keep my seat by 734 votes out of over 5.5 million cast. So that's a close election. But the work that the 501c4's infrastructure in my state did, they chased and cured enough provisional and absentee ballots to secure my win. I got to see that power front row. Now, it was a close race. My opponent sought recounts of our race, as was his legal right. And I was always careful to say that recounts are a normal and healthy part of our democratic process. And so 2 independent recounts confirmed that I won by 734 votes. But again, instead of conceding, my opponent filed a lawsuit to launch an all-out assault on the voters of North Carolina. Over 6 months and 2 days, he challenged more than 68,000 lawful voters, targeting military service members and their families who were registered in heavily blue counties. The voters challenged were disproportionately women, disproportionately people of color, and disproportionately young. Now, obviously, he wasn't saying there was a problem with election administration across the board because Donald Trump won North Carolina. My opponent and his allies, though, wanted to be able to pick and choose which election results would stand. And at no point could he point to a single ineligible voter. He simply wanted to change the rules of the game after it had been played. Our state appellate courts, including the court I sit on, were willing to indulge these attacks on democracy. So we spent more than 180 days fighting back. Our in-state infrastructure, supported by so many of y'all in the room here, stepped up to defend the 68,000 lawful voters at risk of being disenfranchised. And this is important. We controlled the narrative in that long fight. Leaning on my movement background, I knew how important defining the problem for the public was. And when you challenge 68,000 voters, guess what? Everyone knows someone. So we made this fight personal for them, and we publicly branded the GOP judiciary as one that puts partisan political ambition above the rule of law. We spoke out in new and legacy media. We communicated on every possible digital platform. And with your help, we made sure that people all across the country and the world knew what was happening in North Carolina. And in early May, a federal judge agreed with us that it was a constitutional violation to try to change the rules of an election after the election was over. With no path forward, my opponent conceded, and in June, I was formally seated on the North Carolina Supreme Court to begin my full term. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when I ran to keep my seat, I did so as a part of a broader 3-election cycle plan to win back our courts for justice. We won my seat, check. Now we've got to defend Justice Anita Earl's seat in 2026, and we are off to a running start. You know how they say whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger? Well, after the last couple of years, Justice Earls and I are ready for anything. And then, after we re-elect Justice Earls, the only Black woman on the North Carolina Supreme Court, we have an opportunity to go on offense and to pick up 3 seats on the North Carolina Supreme Court. And let me do the math for you. With 8-year terms, that guarantees that a pro-democracy majority is in control of the North Carolina Supreme Court during the 2030 census and 2031 redistricting. And that matters for all of us. When we lost control of the North Carolina Supreme Court in 2022, that court gave the green light to partisan gerrymandering. New maps took a 7-7 congressional delegation and flipped it to 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. That change, just in North Carolina, was control of the U.S. House of Representatives. That's how important our plan to win back our state Supreme Court is nationally. State courts can be the last line of defense on reproductive freedom, on the environment, on workers' rights, on gerrymandering, on election administration, but only if state courts are willing to serve as a check and balance against extremism in the other branches. A lot of folks have asked me how I stayed optimistic and energetic during the 182 days, not that I was counting, that we were fighting to defend our election. And the answer is so easy. Every day I was inspired by the people in this room and people just like you. I am moved to my core by people fighting back and fighting hard, when people speak out and speak up, not just for themselves, but for their fellow North Carolinians and their fellow Americans. And my fight became a truly nationwide effort. Whether you were in Arizona or Michigan, donating to our legal defense fund or spreading awareness made a difference. Because so many challenged voters had voted absentee, we needed to connect with voters everywhere. And if we had needed to cure 68,000 ballots, and we might have, We were ready to do it because of you. We had, for example, a challenged voter stationed at a base in Antarctica, and we had a plan to get that voter's vote cured from the South Pole. That says something about our power, doesn't it? Look, we had a near miss on a constitutional crisis in North Carolina that still has serious implications for our democracy, not just there, but across the country. But I will tell you that moving forward, I'm moving forward not with despair for our future, but with hope, because I have witnessed our collective power. We fought to keep power in the hands of people, not politicians. You demanded accountability and used your voices to speak out for our constitutional rights. Voters stepped up to protect other voters. And all of that's worth fighting for. We have before and we will continue to see efforts to undermine your rights and our democracy. It's why we must continue to focus on judicial races, to protect democracy, to secure our rights, to ensure that our government works for the people. We have to elect officials who will put the Constitution, the rule of law, and their oath above the party and above their own political ambition. And I am energized like never before to fight for the rights of people all across this country, and I am here asking you to fight that fight with me hand in hand. Thank you, Netroots Nation.